Tonight's upload is brought to you by our patrons from the Patreon page. That's Cecilia Spears, Hawaii, Carl Leakins, Catherine McClear, Sean Campbell, Iron Alexa, Allison Sibe, Ryan Woodward, TikTok12, Bree, Bonanza Jellybean, and Kai Antez. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel through Patreon. And if anybody listening right now enjoys the content of the 80 Slasher Librarian YouTube channel and would like to help keep it going and growing for a long time to come, then click the link in the description below and sign up on Patreon for as low as $2 to $5 per month. You get some great rewards depending on the tier you select, such as the $2 tier gets you the early access content, the $5 tier gets you the early access plus a free ebook emailed to you every 3 months, and every 12 months you get a free gift from the merch store. There's also a $15 tier that gets you a free gift from the merch store every 6 months, a free ebook every 3 months, and you can appear on the podcast and voice a character in an audiobook narration once per month. So there's many choices to choose from. Just click the Patreon link in the description below and check it out. Child's Play 2, The Novelization. Chapter 16. Joanne did her best to act normal. She had bags under her eyes, and more she was beginning to think that Phil was right. Andy might be too much of a problem for them. Even Kyle was too much. She thought about the broken statue, the shattered mother, the baby. Maybe, she admitted, it was time to put away my fantasy of being a mother. Andy was waiting at her elbow for her to finish putting a sandwich in a baggie. She slid the bag sandwich inside a brown bag with a banana and a granola bar. "There you go," she said, smiling. Andy didn't smile back.
"Come on!"
she heard Kyle call from the front door.
"We're late, for crying out loud!"
Joanne stepped close to Andy. This has to be a tough day for him, she thought. Brand new school, new kids, and she reached out and touched his shoulders. "Andy, have a good day." He nodded. She kept smiling, but the boy's face was grim, set. His eyes kept shifting over to the cellar door. He's obsessed, she thought, and for the first time she wondered if those other stories she had heard could be true. Someone killed that babysitter. She looked at him. Could it have been?
"Andy!"
Kyle yelled. Joanne smiled again, forcing the cloud away. She pulled him close and planted a kiss on the top of his head. "Better go," she whispered. He seemed so sweet, she thought. She went to the kitchen window and watched him run to catch up with Kyle at the curb. Phil had said he was going to call the center about Kyle today. "She can't stay," he said, "not after what she had done." Joanne watched them walk away, golden in a brilliant morning sun. The way it would be if they were my kids, she thought. Making lunches, kissing them goodbye. Then they were gone, and she turned away from the window. She saw the cellar door. The doll was down there.
"Chucky did it! You have to kill him!"
Andy had screamed. Kyle swore that she hadn't had anything to do with it. The whole thing was just like... Someone grabbed her elbow, and Joanne made a small yelping sound, and then turned to see Phil, who planted a kiss on her neck. "An egg shake?" she offered distractedly, but he shook his head. "No, sweets, I'm running late. Big meeting first thing. I'll grab an oat bran muffin from Pedro's cart." He started for the front door, and she followed. "Are you going to call the center?" she asked, so very quietly. Phil scooped up his attaché case on his way out to the driveway, and then kept on going. "Yes," he said. Joanne followed him outside. "Yes, because we haven't gotten a decent night's sleep since that boy got here, Joanne. We can't live this way." He got to his car and stopped. "I can't live this way." "So what are you suggesting we do?" She squinted in the sun. She knew the answer he would give. "You don't have to make it sound so horrible. It just didn't..." He popped open his car door. It didn't work out." She reached out and grabbed his arm. "Do you know how horrible that will be for him? To have to go back there?" "Traumatic for him or you, Joanne?" She turned away. He was very serious this time, but she felt him touch her back. Hey, I'm sorry, Joanne. I've supported you in this whole foster parent thing. But I'm worried about you, about us. He'd have to leave eventually. So would Kyle. They all do. They don't belong to us." "I know that. Believe me, I know that." She turned back to him. She shook his hand in hers. I just think we can help him. He's so scared and so alone. It's not fair." "It's more than we can handle," Phil said emphatically. "We tried. But he's a special kid. He needs special help." He got into the car. "It's way out of our league." Phil shut the door and then rolled down the window. Joanne nodded and then leaned close to kiss him. She watched while he started the engine and backed down the driveway. He gave her a final wave before he roared off down the sun-bleached street. Joanne pulled her robe close and turned back, slowly towards the house. But then she stopped. There in the driveway she saw pieces of glass. A big piece, then smaller pieces scattered around. She looked up at the living room window, then up to the bedroom windows, but everything looked intact. She knelt down to get a better look at the glass pieces. She picked the big piece up carefully in her hands, noticing the trace of green paint near one edge. Then she looked straight ahead at the recessed window of the cellar, at the splintery green window frame. One of the panes was broken, as if a baseball had sailed into it. No, not a baseball, more like a volleyball. She shook her head. No, it didn't look like something had crashed into it, no. It looked like something had crashed out of it. But she stood up, and beyond making a note to call the glazier, she thought no more about the broken window.
Will you move your butt?
Andy looked up and saw Kyle waiting for him at the corner. He looked back at the house, thinking about Joanne alone with Chucky. She should believe me, he thought. She's in danger. They're all in danger.
Come on!
Kyle yelled. Andy jogged along the clean sidewalk in the bright sun. This was so different from the city, where there was garbage everywhere, where the streets were filled with wads of dried gum and cigarettes. He jogged up next to Kyle.
You know, you're going to miss your bus, Squirt, and I'm going to be late for school.
Kyle reached out and pulled him by the collar until he was right next to her. Then she hurried him around the corner and down the block. Andy looked ahead and saw a line of kids waiting.
The bus stops right here at 8:30, which means that it'll be here any second. They don't wait for you, and Joanne can't drive you.
She looked down at him, her face all squinty and mad.
So don't be late, 'cause they'll blame me.
Andy nodded, and he felt something as if he was being watched, as if somewhere back at the corner, near a clump of bushes. He turned around, but there was nothing there, just the bright, blinding sun bouncing off the white houses, the clean sidewalk, the flat black street.
Hey, what are you looking for?
Kyle asked. Andy turned back around quickly.
Nothing,
He said. She leaned close to him, an evil smile on her face forming.
Are you afraid that Chucky's coming to get you?
She spoke quietly, but Andy saw the other kids looking over, wondering who the new kid was, he guessed, wondering what Kyle was saying. Maybe they know I'm just a foster kid. He shook his head, and then he heard the distant roar of a bus. His mom always took him to school. He never took a school bus. Now he heard this terrible groaning sound in the distance. He couldn't see the bus, but a low rumble filled the air. The other kids started jostling for a place on line. He saw one boy with the short, wiry haircut push a smaller kid out of the way. Then the kid with the short haircut laughed. Not a nice kid, Andy guessed. Kyle was still there, still close to him.
Hey, Andy boy, tell me one thing. How did you manage to tie yourself up last night? That was one gnarly trick.
The roar of the bus grew, and even blocks away Andy saw the yellow shape take the corner and come charging toward him.
I already told you. I told you what happened.
He said.
Oh, right.
She laughed as she backed away from him.
Get real.
The bus seemed to be going way too fast to ever stop in front of the line of kids, but then with a great squill of its brakes it stopped right at the head of the line. The doors whooshed open and the kids filed in. Andy started for the line, but then turned back to Kyle.
I know you don't believe me. No one believes me. You're just like everyone else,
he said. Andy stepped onto the bus and took another look at Kyle. Her face had changed. She wasn't grinning, and there wasn't a nasty sneer in her face. She looked... He went up another step and the door closed, while Kyle kept looking at him. She looked worried, like the way his mother had looked the time he had the flu and Mom didn't go to work. She just sat by his bed, read to him, and felt his brow. "Take a seat," the driver snapped. Andy turned around. The driver held a plastic cup filled with something hot. A thin, smoky cloud rose from the cup. Andy nodded and moved down the aisle, following the other kids. The bus was crowded. Most of the kids were already sitting together, talking to each other, laughing. Andy felt very alone. He saw an empty seat ahead, but the kid next to it was the mean kid with the short haircut. Andy thought of moving to the back, but he felt the driver's eyes on him, waiting for him to sit so he could take them all to school. Andy started to move into the seat, and the kid quickly brought up his leg, covering the seat. He grinned at Andy, an ugly grin, and the kid had something in his hand, something that he started to throw at Andy. Andy backed away against the seat across the aisle. Kids yelled at him and gave him a push back the other way, and the grinning kid shot a yo-yo out at Andy. Andy fell back again before he saw the yo-yo stop and roll back into the kid's hand. The kid laughed gleefully. It was a good guy yo-yo. Andy saw the good guy on the side. He turned around quickly. All the kids were laughing at him. The driver yelled, "Take a seat!" Andy looked at the back. He saw an empty seat all the way in the back, next to a small boy who was sitting quietly, with a good guy lunchbox held tightly on his lap. He's everywhere, Andy thought, hurrying to that seat. Chucky's face is everywhere. He took his seat. The kids clapped rudely, and the bus grunted and pulled away, taking Andy to his new school. There were moments when Chucky thought that the brat could feel him there, waiting in the bushes, hiding behind parked cars, following him. "We're close, the two of us," he thought. "We're regular little blood brothers." He watched Andy talking with Kyle. "Soon to be my big sister," he thought happily. "We'll be able to do lots of things together." He knew he couldn't wait for the little brat to get home. There just wasn't that kind of time to squander. He examined his hand where the fingers had been smashed in the truck. They throbbed like real fingers. No, his time was running out. The best solution would have been to get one of the other kids to bring him right on the bus. What kid wouldn't pick up a lost good guy doll? Something for show and tell. But how could he do that? What? Just lie on the sidewalk and wait for one of the little squirts to bring him on the bus? No, that was too risky. They might take me back to their house, he thought, lock me in some closet with Candyland and old soccer shoes. No, he saw there was only one way, so he rode on the axle. After all, he was the right size, and, for all his bleeding and pain, he was practically indestructible. And after the first terrible minutes, with the bus's smelly exhaust billowing around him, it wasn't so bad. Holding on to the axle, his feet dangling just inches above the street. "I'm going back to school," he thought. "I learned you can't get anywhere without a good education." When the bus stopped, Chucky hung there, hiding behind the wheels. He watched Andy and the others trooping off to the schoolyard. When he heard the whoosh of the bus's doors shutting, he hurried to some bushes near the school fence. Now this was a problem. Can't just go marching in there. Chucky thought he might run into a little snot-nosed hall monitor. "Gee, do you have a pass, little fella?" "No, but I can squeeze your nuts real good if you'll just bend down here." No, he decided to wait, to think, to concentrate. A good solution would present itself. The school bell rang in the playground while Chucky crouched under a bush, his hands dug into the chain-link fence, planning his next move. The teacher's name was Miss Kettlewell, and she wasn't at all like his real first-grade teacher back at his old elementary school. His real teacher was young and smiled a lot. She always led the kids in funny songs and had great art activities to do. This woman, Andy thought, was like a witch. She must be at least 100 years old. She didn't smile at him when he was brought to the class by the principal, a man who seemed very, very busy. She just nodded to him and pointed to a desk. Even the principal seemed scared of her. Then Andy saw that the seat she had pointed out was right in front of that mean kid with the short hair. What happened to the kid that used to sit there? Andy wondered as he trudged back to the seat. What happened to him? Miss Kettlewell took roll, and he learned that the name of the kid behind him was Rick Spicer. The fun started right away. Rick Spicer kept tapping under Andy's seat with his foot. Tap, tap. All morning long, while Andy copied words off the board. The at family, a sign said. So Miss Kettlewell had written hat, cat, rat, fat. Andy turned around once to ask the Spicer kid to stop tapping his chair, and just when Miss Kettlewell looked up from her desk at that. "Andy Barclay, kindly keep your eyes on your work. We work very hard in this class." Just my luck, thought Andy. I turn around for 1 second and I get caught. The teacher must have radar. Then they did some numbers stuff. It was easy enough for Andy, who knew how to add and subtract. He finished his sheet quickly, and, watching what the other kids did, he brought it up to Miss Kettlewell. She took it and put it on a pile to the side. Some of the work seemed like nursery school stuff. Andy wondered if he hadn't been put in a special class for crazy kids. But some of the kids looked okay. They were dressed nice, they were doing their work. Spicer started tapping his chair again, of course, and Andy heard him snickering behind him, whispering to a friend across the aisle. But Miss Kettlewell saw and heard nothing. Except if I do anything, Andy knew. I hate this, he thought. But then, as if it was a miracle, Miss Kettlewell stood up and said, "Children, we'll go to recess now, and today, since it's so lovely, you'll be outside." The entire class started celebrating and said aloud, "Yeah!" Miss Kettlewell just frowned. "And class, how do we line up?" And then all together the class grunted, "In alphabetical order." Outside, Andy thought. Out of this classroom. That was good news. He didn't even care when Miss Kettlewell snared him by the collar and guided him to his correct alphabetical position, while all the other kids laughed at him. "Barclay B," she said loudly. "B is for Barclay." She pushed him into the line. "Now remember your position, young man." He nodded while the other kids giggled at him some more. This is going to be a long day, he thought. They burst out of the school, all of them, the noisy brats, screaming and yelling, laughing as if they didn't have a care in the world, except for poor little Andy. Now there's a troubled-looking lad, Chucky thought. But nothing a little soul-swapping can't cure. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been Chapter 16 of Child's Play 2, the novelization of the film. Very good chapter. In the movie, this chapter was probably accounted for 5-10 minutes of screen time, And I know the book version we only got 23 minutes of, but it's more fleshed out, at least double what we got in the movie, and that's what I enjoy about it. The morning after Andy being tied up, I love the thoughts going through Joanne's head. Part of her just feels like it's too much with Kyle and Andy, and the other part of her is so desperately in need of being loved and being needed by a child and being a mom. It's like I really hate to see these characters die. Don't really care for Phil from the movie or the book, but Joanne in the book is a lot more likable and relatable, and I'm really enjoying how the author is giving us more fleshed out characters. Because, the guy could have just done like a 150-page straight novelization of the movie, but I'm loving that he's adding to Chucky's story. He's adding to Andy's inner dialogue, Kyle's inner dialogue, everybody's thoughts, Really digging that, especially the Chucky stuff, getting into his head, his planning and scheming and remembering stuff from his past. I've really enjoyed how that book's given us that. And there's some really good kills coming up. Haven't had a lot of those so far in the book, but nor did we have a lot of those in the movie by this point. But yeah, guys, I'm looking forward to getting back and doing more chapters of this. Took a couple days off just to recoup my voice a little bit, putting out double uploads. Probably tomorrow I'll start doing the 2 uploads a day, putting out a Child's Play 2 upload and an Elm Street Part 3 upload. So I hope you guys enjoy that. And having Joanne doubt herself and kind of think the whole story might be true, that was pretty cool. The change in Kyle's demeanor when Andy's getting on the school bus and says, "You don't believe me, I knew you wouldn't, nobody ever does," and he looks back at her. I think it's going through her head, how the hell did he tie himself up in that bed? Maybe there is more to this, and he's being awfully defensive about it, and very emotional. So, but one thing I don't like about the book is how Andy's already going through PTSD over the whole Child's Play 1 incident, and he's got a stepfather, or a foster father, that's pretty much mean to him, a foster mother that's pretty much given up on him, a foster sister who's kind of a pain in the ass, sometimes nice, sometimes mean. He really can't figure it out, Then a kid picking on him first thing, and now the teacher, pretty much picking on him and treating him bad. I know the movie that's how it was, but that's one of my only things I really don't dig about the movie or the book so far. We get it. Andy's going through shit. All these people doing this to him, and Chucky's back torturing him, mentally. And it's like, okay, I get it. The kid is going through some shit, but you don't have to just pile it on. But I guess it does help make it worth it in the end, And for all of us that have seen the movie, we all know that Miss Kettlewell has a date with Chucky pretty soon. I'm looking forward to that scene. Alright guys, until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and be safe out there, Slashaholic.